In the episode immediately preceding this, we served you the paper presentation that led to the discussion at the 4th Plenary Session at the 28th Annual Tax Conference. The paper was delivered by Mr. Femi Olarinde on behalf of the Executive Chairman NRS, Dr. Zacchaeus Adedeji. The Executive Chairman concluded his paper with a call for cooperation and partnership between the Nigeria Revenue Service and various stakeholders.
Before I close, a call to partnership. He said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The transformation described in this paper is real and irreversible. But no revenue authority succeeds in isolation. The NRS call upon every stakeholder to join this journey as a full and active partner. The CITN and the tax professional study the reform laws deeply, guidelines towards full compliance, engage constructively on interpretive questions, and uphold the ethical standards that makes tax practice a noble calling. Your credibility shapes taxpayer perception of the entire system. To the business community, engage with a digital platform, invest in your own compliance infrastructure, and recognize that taxes are foundation of infrastructure, security, and service that your businesses depend on. To civil society and the media, be the watchdog, scrutinize performance, celebrate competent taxpayers, and amplify the stories of how revenue transforms lives. An informed public is the most powerful ally of a transparent revenue service. And to the subnational revenue authorities and the federal agencies, deepen data sharing, resolve jurisdictional overlaps constructively, and align around shared national objective of maximizing domestic revenue mobilization for every tier of government and every Nigerian citizen. We ask for your partnership, your constructive engagement, and your commitment to building with us the fiscal foundation that Nigeria's future demands and the people deserves.
The paper was discussed by a panel of discussants made up of Professor Rafiu Oyeshola Salawu, Head of Department, Accounting and Taxation, Obafemi Awolowo University; Dr. Abdurrauf Aliyu, Senior Policy Advisor, African Center for Tax and Governance; Mr. Olumide Eson, Partner and West Africa Tax Leader at Deloitte; and Mrs. Sade Omoniyi, Executive Chairman, Kwara State Internal Revenue Service. Chairman of Session, Mrs. Ifueko Omoigui Okaro, former Executive Chairman FRS, now NRS, flagged off the discussion.
So just a few nuggets from the presentation. One is for us to remember that trust is not a byproduct of compliance, but a precondition. So as our discussants, dwell into the areas that we'll be looking at, it's how can we really improve that trust as a precondition for compliance. The second is noting, and I don't know whether the office is here, one of the key changes in the reforms that are being implemented is the creation of the Office of the Tax Ombudsman. And it will be good if the Tax Ombudsman is here during question and answer to give us a sense of where we are in that journey. A very critical part of building trust and confidence, and again, we'd like to thank the reformers for putting this in place. The third big area that we talked about is the people, process, and technology changes that are going on in the service. The size of the service, over 12,000, and still growing. The change from just looking at training to actually building a tax academy. Again, one of the fruits of the reform. He also talked about the movement from ITAS to Tax Promax to Rev 360, incorporating AI. Again, it would be nice to know where are we in this journey and if there are any questions around that and how we can partner with the NRS in ensuring the vision comes to pass. And last but not the least is a call for partnership, which is why I mentioned as we raise questions, please identify additional things where partnership will really help, as requested, elevate the tempo. So we'll move now to the discussants, and I really would just ask them to respond to just one question in terms of the paper, but also in terms of the call to partnership. So if there are areas that were not covered in the paper, please feel free to add to it in helping to elevate our tax system. So the first person I'd like to call on to speak will be Mrs. Shade Omoni, and to talk about, in all that has been said and all that has been planned, what is institutional coordination required between federal and state revenue authorities to ensure technology-enabled administration improves efficiency without creating duplication or taxpayer fatigue? And also give us an insight into the ongoing collaboration between NRS and the state revenue authorities.
The journey has been quite interesting, and we have had a very long track record in relationship between the subnationals and the NRS as it is now. But we still have a long way to go, and it essentially borders on data. There's data and there's clean data. What has happened over time, especially with the subnationals, is we grapple for information, and some of this information is available in other spheres of government. To a reasonable extent, there's been collaboration in getting information about individuals with the NRS, but it's always, you know what it is like with what people wanting not to comply. There's usually a lot of bottlenecks in getting this information. And at the same time, you find that institutions that have data for us to use, there's always a cost to access to that data. So it gives the subnationals a lot of challenges in doing accurate assessments and accurate understanding. We have had situations where the subnationals, I'll give you a good example of in Kwara. We have an agency that was introduced for the registration of residents in Kwara State. And incidentally, we used the national name as our point of call. When the JRB was providing the tax IDs for these people, the data from Kwara was adjusted to be very, very clean. Now, for us, it is because we had taken that step. And it comes as a cost to JRB. Another issue that I want to point out is for technology in the subnationals, not all states are at the same level. We have different levels of automation or digitization, as the case may be. Now, the new tax reform has brought about the need for even further digitization. So it becomes quite a challenge for some states to leapfrog to where they're supposed to be. So if you now add the challenge of having to put a price to access to data, it becomes even more compounded. I also want to add here that even though we do a lot of collaboration at our level, we're getting most of the things that we need. There's still quite a long way to go. Pointed out here, we understand the fact that data needs to be protected, but the challenge is that even if we put the data protection protocols in place, having access without verification is a major challenge. I remember when you make a field mandatory, I'm getting a bit technical now, some of our people not understanding the implication of just putting wrong data, might just put a dot. So clean data is very key, and verification of data at any particular time. It helps the subnationals to be able to assess people properly, the efficiency of their systems, which is very, very key, and at the same time being able to improve the trust by taxpayers. Incidentally, because of all of these reforms, people are beginning to see what tax revenue is being used for in some states. My colleague from Ekiti yesterday said that in his state, people have now started coming voluntarily to provide information for the IRS. It's happening in Kwara too, because people can now visibly touch some of the returns from what they have been paying for. So for us, even though we have all of these challenges, there's been a subtle response from taxpayers. It needs to grow rapidly, but it has started. But all of this has to do with efficiency of the services we provide. When taxpayers come for information or they come for any relationship at all with the IRS, being able to provide the information efficiently or the service efficiently is very, very key to improving the trust between the IRS and the taxpayers. So this is also very, very important. I also want to stress here that it's an ongoing process. It's going to take a while. The tax reforms have been implemented or are being implemented. We can't all implement at the same time or conclude at the same time. It's an ongoing process, and there are different levels with which there has been level of implementation as far as the states are concerned. So for us, collaboration between the NRS and the subnationals is ongoing, but at the same time, we need that collaboration between the subnationals and other agencies of government for the work of the subnationals to be more effective and efficient as the case may be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, just some nuggets. First is an acknowledgement that people are actually coming voluntarily in certain states because they can touch some of the changes that are going on. So there's a subtle response that started, but there's a challenge that we need to keep at this, to get it to a higher level, and it will take improved efficiency to make this happen. Not just improved efficiency, we need to be patient because ongoing reforms has also started, but still some journey to go, and we should be dogged in ensuring we just persist in making that happen. And while collaboration with the NRS is continuing, also with the Joint Revenue Board, that is again a product of the reforms, it's important to also acknowledge that it's not enough for it to be collaboration between the state and the NRS, but also collaboration with other government agencies, and also collaboration between state tax authorities.
The next discussant is Professor Rafiu Oyeshola Salau.
So I'd like to move on to Professor Salau and to request, particularly in looking at the human side of tax administration, to examine the extent to which Nigeria's tax reforms are moving. Remember, it's a journey, so this is the extent and what now more needs to be done. The system from enforcement-driven compliance towards trust-based, evidence-driven, and institutional credible compliance.
To respond to the question raised by the moderator, the new fiscal order championed by the NRS through the Nigeria Tax Reform Act was to seek the shift of the narrative from aggressive extraction to data-driven administration. And if you look at this topic, the subject matter we are looking at this morning, there are two parties to it. I'm coming from the background of academics. We have administrator here, we have practitioner here, and that will give cross-fertilization of ideas. Two parties, the tax administrator and the tax payer. The tax payer always demand for efficiency from the tax administrator. And the tax administrator also seek to earn trust of the taxpayer. I didn't say demand, because trust is reciprocal. You don't demand for it, you earn it. And the tax administrator can earn the trust of the taxpayer through transparency, accountability, simplicity, and that is what is expected of the taxpayer. The paper presenter has done justice to this paper. He said that trust is not a byproduct of compliance. Trust is the foundation of compliance. In other words, compliance is the product of trust. And the two key concepts are very important for the tax administration in Nigeria. Efficiency builds the system. Trust sustains it. And when we talk about efficiency in tax administration without trust will build resistance. And tax trust without efficiency will build waste. What is efficiency? Efficiency is the ability to achieve maximum productivity with little amount of time, energy, resources. And there are two major components, indicators of efficiency. One, waste or cost minimization. And two, optimal performance in terms of revenue generated, either at the federal level or at state level. To be able to answer your question as regards the efficiency and trust, I will pick the efficiency one after the other using the letter. The first letter is talking about the ease of compliance. Already the NRS, they have created enabling environment for the taxpayer as regard the process and assessment of the tax liability of each taxpayer. Not only that, the multiple taxation have been removed. E-filing of the tax system have been introduced. The next letter is F, fairness and equity in assessment. And we can see what is going on among the low-income earners who are exempted from paying tax, and for those who are earning more than 50 million, they are to pay around 25% as company income tax. And around 97% of the small business that their turnover is below 100 million are now exempt from compliance for company income tax. The next form is functional digital system. At the paper presenter, he has done justice to this area. Platforms like Nigerian Revenue Service portal are now reliable, and that one will reduce the downtime and the human interface. Modernizing the interface between the government and the citizen reduce human interface, which often breed distrust. They have introduced what we call mandated is enforcing, universal TIN requirement, and automated verification. Another one that is high, that is institutional coordination, legal harmonization, and simplicity. And I think in this area, the Nigerian Revenue Service has done a lot with the new act. The better synergy among the states and the federal government, as pointed out by the last speaker here, they have put a lot of things in place to enhance harmonization between the federal government and the state government. The next letter you see, that is cost effectiveness and communication. And I want to say this. You can recall last year when the bill was presented at the Senate, there was a lot of argument, resistance. But along the line, though it was not taken at that time, but they engaged in public enlightenment, they engaged various stakeholders. Information is very important. When you are not properly informed, you will permanently deform. The gap between failure and success in business and policy implications is just an information. And that one is very, very important. And I think the NRS team will work on that in collaboration with the CITN, because they have done a lot. I want to commend the president. Almost every week or every month, you will see one training or the other. However, we need to go to the grassroots. If you listen to the one of the royal father that came here yesterday, there's open door. You can write a proposal to NRS. They will finance it so that it will, the people will understand. Some people see tax as a burden, as a punishment. They need enlightenment. So cost effectiveness and communication. And paper presented highlighted the principle of taxation given by Adam Smith. I think is to come to play. The information transparency, enforcement in equity, neutrality in policy implication, and capacity building. Let me say one or two things here. Though the paper presented are giving us the clue, you have employed about 15,000 people, am I right? And capacity building is still going on. People that are not trained will jeopardize the effort of the ongoing reform, and it even jeopardize the implementation of the act. And I want to say this to the NRS. Thank God for Dr. Sak Adedeji. He has created an enabling environment for people that are trained. If people are trained and the remuneration is not good, and he has addressed that one, if you train an individual and the person leave the second day, you go back to Sikwawan. And I want to say this in the area of capacity, as raised by the first speaker. It's now necessary for the NRS to partner with the tax authority at the state level to organize the same training, capacity building for them. It's very, very germane. And that will enhance compliance. Somebody said, I think Mr. Tawo Ayodele, only 15 states keyed into this tax act we are talking about. What happened to the rest? We need to extend that area. And lastly, on the issue of trust, as raised by the moderator, trust means belief in reality, truth, or ability of an individual. And taxpayer must have trust in the tax administrator. How can they achieve it? I pick the word trust. The first one is transparency in revenue use. If there are transparency and there's mechanism put in place based on the presentation by the paper presenter. 2, removal of multiple taxes and responsiveness to taxpayer. I think that one will be addressed also by the current Tax Act. Then number 3, understanding taxpayer reality and social contract. Let me see one or two things here. When we talk about social contract, people are paying tax. They are waiting to see the dividend of the tax they have paid. If there are good roads, power supply, healthcare services, education. I'm telling you, in developed country, people see tax as a voluntary, a civic obligation, not under duress, and they are willing to pay. Why? Because they can see the dividend. That area is very important. And sharing body equitably and service-oriented approach. And finally, timely delivery of public goods and accountability. And looking at the paper presented today, there's a mechanism whereby the taxpayer can monitor, can see. And they should go beyond that one. Accountability is very, very important. Nigeria Revenue Service will collect tax. Larger percentage will go to federation account. On monthly basis, state will come and share the money. Why can't we ask them? The one you collected last month, can you give all the analysis, how it was allocated, how it was spent? This one is very, very germane. And finally, I want to say that trust and efficiency are the 2 pillars that can assist the NRS at the federal level and tax authority at the state level to have a smooth
tax administration. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Just to repeat, Professor Salawi says trust and efficiency are two pillars that will enhance the ability of NRS and state tax authorities to have a smooth tax administration. I think that summarizes what he said. And he also has commended the lead presenter that a number of the issues have been addressed, but it's important that on a continuing basis, that information gap is looked at, and also the issues of the social contract. And recognizes that NRS's role is revenue administration, and so putting in place roads, healthcare, and so on may not be exactly, or is not exactly within the remit of the tax authority, but questions can be asked, particularly when the revenues being generated are being distributed. So before you distribute the next one, could you ask questions of what has happened to the last revenue? And perhaps that could be one way of intervening in that area. So thank you, Professor Salawi. When talking, you talked about two parties, the tax administrators and the taxpayers, but you also introduced a third party, and that is the tax professional. And we have in our midst Mr. Esson, I believe, who is the partner and West African tax leader for Deloitte, to look at an area that they dwell a lot on, and in a sense, drives a lot of their practice. And perhaps answer this question of how Nigeria's reform direction compares with regional and global trends in tax administration, particularly around real-time reporting, cooperative compliance, cross-border transparency, and digitalized revenue systems.
For some time in Nigeria, we've talked about issues around taxation, right? The problem has never been with the tax policies. It's always been around weak and fragmented administrative provisions and multiple laws. That has been cardinal to the tax reforms. As someone who was privileged to be part of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform Committee, the Law Reform Subcommittee, I know that there was genuineness and there was real interest in actually turning this around, simplifying compliance for taxpayers and simplifying administration for the tax administrators. And as part of that process, there was a lot of benchmark around what exactly is best in class. And what are the advanced countries doing, the countries we aspire to be like, and also what are the countries around Africa doing. I remember the story around one of the countries in East Africa, which we shared in the room while the administrative bill was being reviewed, that if you bought a new piece of car, you might get a notification from the Revenue Service congratulating you on the acquisition and also reminding you that you'll be looking forward to your return at the end of the year. And that was really very interesting because then, they are not adversaries, they are just celebrating with you, but also reminding you that, wherever the money came from, we believe there will be some tax you will pay at the end of the year, which is where Nigeria is also now headed. We want a digitalized tax system that is easy to administer and is easy for compliance on the part of the taxpayer. So, comparison across the best in class in Africa and also best in class around the world. But having said that, we've always struggled with one of the aspects that Prof mentioned, which is contract, the social contract, right? So there has been the trust issues, which has been very low compared to the rest of the world. And what have been driving this for some time are things around management of public fund, right? Where taxpayers really want to know what you're doing with their taxes. In other places, the process is more transparent. I'm happy that the presenter on behalf of the EC mentioned Rev 360, which I believe means Revenue 360, maybe that can be extended to now cover how the revenue is disbursed as well. So we know it's complete cycle. We see the money that we are putting in, and we see what is being used for. Already as we are seeing in Kwara and Ekiti State. Look, people will be willing to pay tax if the taxes are utilized responsibly and transparently. People want to see that you're using the money where it matters, where it makes the most impact in the lives of the taxpayers. You know, healthcare, you know, human capital development, infrastructures. Yeah, I mean, people are willing to pay their taxes, and if it's done transparently. One of the things we also found out is issues around, you know, data privacy and security. As we digitalize, which is the path forward, which is what everybody is doing, there have been resistance on the part of the taxpayer, for example, integrating the system with the former FRS, because we're concerned about, you know, data security. Of course, I think we've moved past that now as a country, and of course, NRS has invested quite a lot in upgrading the technology system, including implementing Rev 360 and e-invoicing. But the issues around data privacy cannot be taken for granted. Now we have just one single source of truth about every taxpayer, which is the tax ID, both for individuals and for companies. And so, you know, people are concerned that, you know, is my data safe? Because ultimately, this point of reference should be used for almost everything. And then the third bit around the fairness in the administration of taxes. Prior to now, people saw, you know, tax administrators as adversaries. You know, they just, you know, they're not considered as friends. But the interesting thing is that tax administrators themselves, they pay taxes. I'm sure Mr. Afem, why do you pay taxes and EC? So we actually should be on the same side with the administrators and the taxpayers. But we need to get to that level of trust where Nigerians see, you know, the various tax revenue services as friends and just as a facilitator in the fulfillment of the social contract. I once, earlier in my career, worked in a European country for a number of years, and when it's approaching the tax season, you start to see emails from the tax authority. The email, the way it comes across, is from someone who does not want you to miss a deadline, someone who does not want you to pay interest and penalty. In fact, they will even end the email by saying, if you're having any challenges whatsoever, please reach our, you know, hot desk or hotlines so we can help you, so you don't miss the deadline. The emails were friendly reminders, but also you could almost think that these guys are family members who just want you to just comply and do the right things. Increasingly, we see NRS in that direction. This last weekend, we saw the publication in the papers where NRS is saying, we're going to be open all weekends, Saturdays, because we know it's approaching filing season, so you can come and file your returns. That is the spirit of a tax authority that is not interested in actually, you know, imposing tax, you know, penalties and interest, but rather encouraging you to do the right thing. Now, if you look at countries around us, particularly East Africa and Southern Africa, they've embraced digitalization a lot, and it's actually driving their tax administration. Look, digitalization simplifies compliance process for taxpayers, but it also eases administration for the administrators, and that is where NRS is also now headed. It's a partnership. You know, the taxpayers and the tax administrator, we have to work together so that there is efficiency in the system. The efficiency now being driven by digitalization, you know, being driven by common tax ID, being driven by simplification of the tax system. I remember the chairman of the committee, sometimes we say, look, why do we have these tax laws that were written in King James Version? Let's try and just write them in simple English that Nigerians speak. In fact, he thought if we can write it in pidgin, let's write it in pidgin. So an average Nigerian can read the tax law and just understand it. And that's the direction the new tax law, as I said, the wordings are simpler. We don't have wholly, reasonably, exclusively, necessarily. Again, I mean, for Nigerians, all those things mean the same thing. So now we just have we. If it's wholly, if it's exclusively incurred, then it is tax deductible. So I think I will end by saying it is a journey, actually, and I will say we have started well, but we need to sustain that public trust between NRS and the various states, revenue services, and the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, to paraphrase, it is a journey. We have started well, but we need to sustain it and earn improved public trust. Also to just remind not just the NRS, which has started in terms of working on weekends, but also the tax authorities at the state levels. So this message is for all state tax authorities to give nice emails, nice letters, encouraging people to file before. And I know Lagos State increased the filing deadline, so maybe that's also one of the friendly emails that he's talking about. But basically that we're all on the same side, I think is what he said. You all pay taxes, even if you're a tax administrator. So let's partner together to raise revenue. So thank you very much, Mr. Esson. So our last discussant, Dr. Lee, Senior Policy Advisor, African Center for Tax and Governance. The last question to dwell on, but it's how tax administration reforms can strengthen public accountability, transparency, and citizen confidence in revenue institutions, building on all the past discussions and also the late presentation. But please also position this question in the realm of the realities of our political economy and help define what will be metrics of success.
I think the paper successfully situated the tax administration and tax reforms generally within the broader context of fiscal sustainability, institutional modernization, digitalization, inter-agency collaboration, and taxpayer trust. I find the paper particularly very important because it's implicitly acknowledged that a true tax system eventually discovers that tax compliance is fundamentally not a legal problem. Rather, it is fundamentally a behavioral and an institutional problem, and that must be addressed. And I think these are one of the things that the tax laws and invariably the tax reforms sought to address. And so, even though the presentation was basically around the NRS, I have experience working around state revenue services, and so I have an idea of certain critical issues that they deal with. And I'm going to also focus around digital transformation, which has been the forefront of most of the reforms that most states actually pay more attention to over time. But again, tax systems are not isolated administrative structures. That again is something very important we must note. But they're also a larger part of the governance ecosystem. And that's where the issue of trust also becomes very, very important. And it's not just very important, but again, it should be the focus and the core of our transformation. So if trust is one of the issues around, we want to build a trust service-driven, trust-enabled revenue service, which now becomes the focus. Every other thing from how we recruit, the technologies we deploy, and even the processes we engineer should be tailored towards how we can achieve those trusts. As I said, trust is not legislated, and trust cannot be automated. Those are very important. Trusts are built over time. And as it is with most state revenue services, one of the challenges they have is around citizens always complain that we don't see what our monies are being used for. And I was, before we come in, I was discussing with Femi that what if states decide to have like a tax receipt initiative? And so anybody who pays a tax of 10,000 naira in a year, for instance, at the end of the year, you can send me a receipt to tell me what component, what are those things that my taxes were used to fund. It gives me a sense of belonging that at least I contributed towards those children who went to school, those women who could have reducing maternity in hospital. And so you could see, okay, out of the 10,000, 2,000 went to healthcare, 1,000, and it goes for everybody. I'm happy we talked about machine learning and artificial intelligence. These are things we can necessarily do. And we can also look at those benchmarks from places like Australia and Sweden. These are core components that are part of things that is used to drive trust. But as I said, our dwell on digital transformation probably has its first stakes. It doesn't matter what kind of technology we deploy, how sophisticated it is. At the end of the day, it's about data-driven compliance. That's what matters, and that should be the forefront. And that should be the engagement we have even with service providers. How can your technology help me improve compliance? Because for me, I think the conversation should be, how can we improve compliance, and then by improving compliance, revenues will increase. But we put more pressure, more attention on the revenue and forget about the compliance. And then that's where we miss it. Technology as it is, whatever it is that we deploy, it should be that once taxpayers want something that is simpler, that's smarter, that they are certain. So if I go into the system, I put in numbers, I'm certain if I do it 10 times, you give me the same figure. Something that is convenient for them, and something that is fast, and something that is cost effective. These KPIs are very, very important. And we look at it. If it costs me 10,000 naira to go to 5,000 naira to go to an office and come back, and I can just use data of 200 naira in my house, in my space at any time to do this, it's cost effective. And these are the canon of taxation. So even in digital transformation, you should be asking these questions around your canon of taxation. How does it? But fundamentally, the 4 areas of compliance should be registration, filing, reporting, and payment. And these are things technology can do easily. But for the taxpayer, as I said, a taxpayer wants to register, but he wants the process to be simple. A taxpayer wants to file, he wants it to be easy and not be convenient. He wants to report, he wants it to be fast. At the same time, he wants to pay, but he wants to be cost effective. So it doesn't matter. And so most often when we discuss at state level, when we discuss digital transformation, we pay more attention to efficiency of processes of the office. And we forget that the technology itself is not meant for taxpayers. It's not meant for the tax authority. The technology itself is meant for the taxpayers. And in the case of the tax authorities, again, back to filing, registration, filing, payment, and tracking non-compliance. No matter how beautiful technology is, it only does 3 things. First, you track who have registered, you track those who are filing or not filing, you track those who have made payment, and then you also track those who have not complied so that you can enforce. And so it doesn't matter what technology you have, it is about tracking, analyzing, and then enforcing. That is what technology does for revenue authorities, nothing else. So whether I use AI, whether I use machine learning, at the end of the day, is for you to be able to analyze who have registered, where do they live, how much do they pay, what do they analyze, and then you enforce for those who are not complying. But fundamentally, again, stakeholder experience is also very, very important. It's a crucial goal and also a very critical part of digital transformation that most states are going through. And so, one of the things I've noticed also I don't know of Madam State, but most of the states I've been to, aside from the NRS that have done extensive taxpayer advocacy, taxpayer education, taxpayer enlightenment, most states are not doing much around these reforms. And I was expecting even states, because I know that let's even take the presumptive tax regulation that was signed. Nobody is saying anything about it. Most people don't even know the regulation that was signed in March. And so the states need to also educate, sensitize more. That again gives, helps to build trust and let people know what they should do. And so it was also one of the reasons why those myths and misconceptions happened during the reform process. Because while the FRS and the committee were doing a lot of education, the states were doing little or not much in their own space. On the final note, I think again it's also very important when we talk about trust. Just like my colleague, my former colleague from Deloitte said, I had always been playing the ideas where your system is automated enough that if filing should happen, if deadline for filing is on the 10th, But on the 7th, you should get an SMS to remind you 3 days to deadline. And then there's also no big deal if at the end of the year, text messages are sent to tell me thank you very much for being part of the success of my state. And then wish me happy new year and prosperity by January. And then you also remind me by January that I have 15 days. So the system can search and know those who have not filed their returns and send messages to them to tell you. So it's called nudging. You begin to actually help people, and people get to understand that. I also don't know reasons why if I pay taxes, a tax authority can also not send me a text message on my birthday and tell me happy birthday when you're a taxpayer. It costs you for SMS of 5 naira. And then you begin to understand that taxpayers sees you beyond just when you're going to pay taxes. But they know your birthday, they know where you are, they know also when you're in crisis. And so those things are very important. They are subtle things and cheap, but again, they can help us to build trust. I think I'll end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think his last comment made me smile, and subtle but actually quite effective. That nothing stops tax authorities from wishing their taxpayers a happy birthday. Sometimes we understate how important those things are. Sometimes people look forward to those messages. And I think it was dwelling on one thing, that let's not remember the taxpayers only when it's time to pay taxes. Let's recognize the taxpayers as part of the ecosystem contributing to the development of our dear country. Now, let me use the opportunity to read out a taxpayer's comment. I promised him that I was going to read this out as his contribution to this discourse. And when I read out this comment, you'll notice why I cannot ignore this comment. When he called me last week, he saw me advertised as one of the resource persons. He felt that he would use me to reach out to the CITN. And this taxpayer is no other than Dr. Michael Omolayole, former chairman CEO of Unilever, former awardee of ICANN, and former awardee of ISEC. Dear Madam, please permit me to send these wishes for a resounding success of the forthcoming conference of the CITN. Through you, I wish to make some suggestions to the current management of the NRS. I'm an active observer of what goes on in the Nigerian capital market, even at the age of nearly 98. So NRS, please give him this gift. It is my considered opinion that the capital market, which is doing extremely well in the last 6 months, is a veritable vehicle for promoting the growth of savings per capita within the Nigerian economy. The statistical record of our country's savings per capita shows abysmally low standards. This standard does not in any way compare with highly developed countries as well as developing countries. I firmly believe, after deep thinking, that rapid growth in savings can be promoted through the capital market. The simple suggestions are: 1, dividends that are completely reinvested should be exempted from tax. B, the proceeds from any shares sold on the capital market, the NGX group, which are 100% reinvested, should not attract any form of taxation. To ensure that the policy is not abused, it should be strictly controlled by SEC and the management of the stock exchange. Please believe me, the policy will work wonders and will also help the growth of pension funds available to the Nigerian Federation government to use wisely under the control of PENCOM. Finally, it is my considered opinion again that there's too much of squandermania within the Nigerian society. We see so much outrageous display of ostentatious spending. There's no reason why policies are not put in place to tax the ostentatious spending if it cannot be banned outright. I wish all participants an enjoyable period of fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
The session provided opportunity for conference delegates to ask questions and make contributions.
I just wanted to, I've been saying this a lot, but I'm not sure to what extent it's been implemented. I think we need like a tax returns or tax support gallery, like you have the ATM gallery, where many people can go in and withdraw their money. I'm thinking of a situation where you have so many computers, fast infrastructure that will enable any taxpayer go into a gallery and try to do some filing. Because it's not everywhere you have power, or you have internet, or you have, so I think every tax office should have a gallery, of some sort, probably manned by a seasoned officer too, to help those who are finding it difficult to interrogate the infrastructure. I think it is really very necessary.
My question is just like a suggestion to the CITN, but let me speak it this way. In the presentation, more emphasis was placed on collaboration and then partnership. I know that where trust needed to increase, we need this transparency, like our prof has said. In doing that, what is CITN doing in terms of some level of mechanism to evaluate what we are doing? For instance, I know of a platform where many of the people I've met here are on such a platform. I've heard Mr. Femi, I've heard many people on that platform called Tax Clinic Corner, and it's doing fantastically well for people who want to know more about taxation. Now, in CITN, we would love a situation whereby there are some reviews, maybe on quarterly basis, to showcase performance of either the revenue heads or subnationals, not waiting for NBS to do the complete statistics data. Report. CITN should do something. If CITN call anybody today and they say, okay, we want to give you an award for being the best in this area, I'm sure such a revenue agency or subnationals will love it. So we can do a quarterly review of performances based on revenue head, revenue agencies and what have you.
Like the lecturers talks more about trust and compliance. And for us to earn trust from the taxpayers, for them to comply, there must be evidence of taxpayers' money at work. Will anything be put in place for taxpayers to see that whatever revenue that is generated, the federal government, the states, the local government, they're actually seeing this money at work? For them to actually have this trust, because we want to earn trust from them now, for them to actually have this trust in us. And as administrators of tax, there's definitely that we can be able to come out to say taxpayer money is actually at work, because at every month there's always a review from the federal, the state, and the local government of taxpayer money that is always at work, for that trust to be there.
To respond to my Oga, part of the things the Institute is actually doing is that on a monthly basis, there is a platform at which we bring in professionals, most especially the executive chairman of the subnational, to talk to us on some of the developments that is actually happening in their states. And that's what we call CITN Taxation RU. With the permission of Mr. Chairman of this session, I'll give 1 minute each as parting words to all our discussion. And let me start with you, Mr. Osun.
For me, the key takeaway is their openness and readiness for partnership and collaboration, and we will hold them to this. For us as practitioners, we relate with them every now and then, and we will call them out if they don't hold to this end of the bargain. Thank you.
The takeaway I want to give the delegate this morning is that compliance build the system. Trust sustain it. Nigeria need the boat now and intentionally. And finally, I want to speak to those who are from academics. All the textbooks on taxation, as at the end of last year, 2025, they become obsolete. And there's a platform, the third front office, they call it Journal and Boost for Publication. You can start writing now, but you can't finalize it until next year, because policy is subject to amendment. As they are implementing, they will discover some shortcomings along the line. And at the end of the year, they may decide to amend one or two. Once that one is done, that will render your textbook useless. There's a gap now because taxation as a discipline is no more static, it's dynamic. And we have to kill it in the academic so that we produce full-fledged and relevant graduates, especially BSc taxation, MSc taxation, and PhD taxation. Thank you.
I just wanted to say here that we created what we call the e-center in Kwara Internal Revenue Service, I think 2022 or 2023. The suggestion from my madam. What has happened is taxpayers come into the premises when they have issues, and they can on their own, with the assistance of people in the e-center, help them in whatever activity they want to run. I just want to also add that the partner from Deloitte said something very interesting about getting a notice or a message about having bought a car. You would notice that for most of the services of government now, you need to provide your name. The idea behind it, which needs to go down to the subnationals, is enforcing the use of name for every statement. We're talking about the Land Bureau. We're talking about the Motor Licensing Authority. So when you come to us and you say you earn only 100,000 naira a month, but you bought a 10 million naira land, and then you bought a 50 million naira car, then you would need to explain to us exactly where that money is coming from. So for us, identity is very, very key. So at the same time, it links up to very clean data. So we at the subnational level are looking at having this ability so that we don't have to work too much in getting assessments right for individuals.
I think I do want to say one thing. Nigeria is a low tax to GDP country, but also Nigeria is also a low trust to GDP country. So we also need, as we're working on the tax to GDP, we also need to work on our trust to GDP.
To also answer one of the questions, the NIS has what we call the self-service centers, where computers are in our offices and you can walk in to use that computer to file your returns. There are also officers that man those computers in case you still do not know how to use computers. And so I'm sure that is what the madam was talking about, though we don't have a gallery, like you said, of many computers. But thank you for that. We'll be considering that as we approach the next phase of tax administration. And also trust, like I've been speaking about. Yes, we said we are open to transparency, that's why we are digitizing, and someone said you cannot automate trust. True. So that means and that is why we are also equipping our staff, training them, and also reorientating them to ensure that they perform well. I want to also say it is reciprocal. So I was sitting there with someone yesterday, and he showed me an invoice that he received, and that invoice was also charging him tax. And the person he asked the person that sent the invoice, sorry, I can't see your tax ID or tax ID on this invoice. What it simply means is that we as Nigerians, if we are paying taxes, we also ensure that every other person we do business with is also fulfilling their own fair share of taxes and fulfilling their obligation. And this is a symbiotic relationship, and it's an ecosystem that we all must ensure we do together. And with this, we can ask for that, we can ask government for that accountability. Thank you very much.
Let me use this opportunity to thank everyone for their contributions, and then leave you with just this one takeaway. And we're actually very blessed in this room to be part of a system that we can beat our chests has been continuously improving. Since 1943, when this tax laws and so on started with the Department of Revenue, in government, there have been changes. And we acknowledge all of our predecessors, acknowledge all staff dead and alive, acknowledge all members of CITN dead and alive, who have contributed to where we are today, and who have also contributed to reforms that continue to improve. And I think the message is that it's a journey. Now with AI, with technology, with improved advocacy, we can leapfrog even faster. And so the challenge for all of us is to take that call to action as we presented to us by the Nigerian Revenue Service, and also a call to action that hopefully the Office of the Tax Ombudsman will be presented to us to report complaints. Also a call to action by the Joint Revenue Board, which is where you have the constellation of all state revenue authorities, to partner, to work together, to build this country to be a much better place. So thank you very much.
Once again, let's put our hands together for them for this session.
The key takeaway from this plenary session is that transforming Nigeria's tax administration is not just about increasing revenue,